Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another interesting video today. We're going to learn the basics of Power BI, right? Some basic formulas, what is Power Query Editor. So we're going to get a refresher of the basics of Power BI. So I'm in the Power BI interface as you see. So first step we can go here, click on new. And now if you click on get data, you have various ways to get data, right? From an Excel workbook, from an SQL server, from a text file and so on. So there are multiple ways of connecting varied data to Power BI. Today we are going to use a simple CSV file. Okay, so I'm going to select text/CSV and then I can go to downloads where I have the file and I'm going to collect and say data sheet 1. Okay, so this is the file that is loading. As you see, it's a very simple data with just few columns. So there is date. In fact, we've used this in one of our projects before as well. Then there's company. Company is basically the name of the shop where I spent money. There is something called as category ID. It looks like whether the shopping belongs to restaurant, grocery, so on and so forth, but there is a number instead of text, and then the associated cost, how much was actually spent, right? All this is there. Now before loading the data into Power BI, what we can do is we can click on transform the data. Okay, so when you click on transform the data, this will open up something called as the Power Query Editor. Okay, so here you can add some rules, create some columns, do some calculations, remove some data and so on, right? There are multiple things that are possible. So first of all, what we are going to try to do here. So I see that, for example, I don't need a specific value. For instance, DB is about train, right? It's about a monthly train ticket. Let us say I don't want to see that value. What I can do here, I can go to company, and as you see, this loads very similar to Excel. So I can filter out DB and say OK, right? The moment I do that, you see there's a new rule called filter rows that is being added, right? So basically now this data that is there does not have DB, right? It has filtered out those values and this won't load into my original data. Okay, so this way you can do that, and same way you see you have an option to remove rows, right? You can write rules. If there are errors, you can remove errors, so on and so forth, right? You can play around with this. This is one thing. Now the second thing, as we were saying, let us say for category ID, I want to add a new column which gives the name of the category actually, right? So if I see around, I see Saravana is 4, Jaipur is another restaurant that is 4, right? So it looks like, for instance, 4 could be restaurant, right? And then if I see 2, there is Reve, there is Interstore, there is Lidl, all these are grocery supermarkets. So it looks like category ID 2, for example, is belonging to grocery, right? So 4 is like restaurant, 2 is grocery. The rest, let us say we can put it as other for now. Okay, now we want to create a new column with 3 categories. So how can we do that? So to do that, you can go to add column and there's an option to add a conditional column. Okay, so you can click on that and then I can simply say category, right? The new column name. So I know if this category ID is like equal to 4, it is restaurant, right? So I can give that a name restaurant, right? As simple as that. I can add another clause. So if this same category ID equals 2, then it looks like it is belonging to grocery, right? So I'm adding this, and otherwise in all the other cases, for now I'll put it as other, right? So else other, and I can say OK. Now a new column is added called category. So as you see, Reve is coming in grocery, Saravana is in his restaurant, the rest of it like Cineplex and all the other things are saying as other, right? So this is like a case statement in SQL. We are asking and adding a new column. Okay. Now, similarly, let us say I want to add another column. Okay, so you see the cost, right? This is actually for me and my wife, for 2 people. Let us say I want to add a new column to calculate the individual cost, right? This has to be 50% of the cost column, right? So to split it into half, as there are 2 people, how can we do that? So here you can go and add a custom column, right? Instead of conditional column, you can add a custom column. So let's say I can give this column a name, individual underscore cost. Okay, can give it any name I want, and I know this is 50%, so I can write 0.5 into the cost, right? So I can double click the cost and say OK. Now you see this individual cost column will be half the value. So if the rent is 630, then obviously the individual cost is half of that, which is 315, and so on, right? So this way we can add a calculated column, this time with a formula, right? This is not like a case statement, but more like a formula. This is called as custom column, right? So you can do these few things. Now one more thing that we need to note here, right? So if you see the data type, okay, company is text, category ID is number, right? Cost is number, and this category is also showing as like a combination of ABC 1 2 3. That doesn't matter. But if you see date, it is showing as a text, right? It's not actually a date. Now how can we change that? So you come here and you go to using locale, right? Because you see here the date format is a bit tricky, because basically you can see that there is first the month January, then the date, then the year, right? So in these cases what we can do, you can come to using locale, right? Something will load, and now we can say now the data type has to be date, and over here we also have to communicate. This is more like an American format as we have month in the beginning. So you can go to English and then try to find United States, right? It will be somewhere. So I'm going to click on that. So it says now you see the month, the date, the year, right? This is the format we want. And click on that and say okay. Now it has converted it into its native format. So 3rd January 2023. So date, month, and then year, right? So it got converted. So to do this, we have to use this using locale method. Now we have a perfect date format as well, right? Now on top of this, one more thing that you can see if you want is, if you go to home and click on advanced editor, you have the steps that we have done, right? For example, transforming the columns, or like removing DB from the data, adding a new column category based on a conditional calculation, so on. This language is called as M language. This is the language of the Power Query editor, right? So you can observe, right? It's easy to understand, but as you see, the format is a bit complicated, but it is just blindly saying the steps that we have performed so far, right? So if you want to check that, you can do that. Click on done. Now that all our changes have been done, so I can go to close and apply. So this will automatically save whatever we did in the Power Query editor. Some loading will happen, and now officially our data will load, as you see, into Power BI, right? Now if you come into the Power BI interface, what are the things to note, right? So there are 3 places, right? So this is called as report view. As you can see, this is where we can build some graphs and so on, right? Then we have a model view. So normally model view, if we have multiple tables, it will also show the relationships and all. Here we have connected only to one data, so we just see that data with the columns and any calculation that we have done, right? As simple as that. Then there is a table view as well. So if we go there, it will load the table of data that we already have, right? So as simple as that, right? So now what we are going to do, what if we want to do some calculations now here, right? Not in the Power Query editor, but basically over here. So what can we do? For example, let us say I want to add a calculation where, let us say if the cost is above 500, I want to call it expensive. If it is above 50, I want to call it medium. And then if it is below 50, I want to call it cheap, right? I want to add a new column like this. How can we do that? So you go here and say new column, right? And now you can give a name. Okay. So you can say cost threshold or something. You can give any name you want, right? And now we can use a switch statement here, right? So you say switch, then true, right? This is the default format. And now what we want to do, we want to say when this cost, right, is above 500, then I want to call it expensive, right? So we'll do that. Then the second step, when this cost is above 50, right, in those cases I want to call it medium. In other cases else I want to call it low or cheap, right? I can say cheap. So I can close that, right? As simple as that. So this is a logic similar to case statement. We can use a switch logic. And now this new column cost threshold will be created. As you see, wherever it's more than 500, like here it's 630, it says expensive. If it's more than 50 but less than 500, like 67 grocery, it's medium. Whereas in interest store we spent only 12, so it shows as cheap, right? This is how we can add a new column, right? This is just one example. Let us say we want to add another column. We want to see what weekday it is, right? We have the date. We want to see what weekday it is. So I can say new column again. Okay, and give it a name, weekday calculation or something, right? And now we can simply call the weekday function. Okay, so I want to calculate the weekday of basically the date column here. So I can select that and just leave it as such, right? Now the formula will calculate, and as you see 3rd January shows as 3 because 3rd January was a Wednesday, right? For example, 7 is 14th January, so 14th January was a Sunday, right? So it starts from Monday 1 all the way to Sunday 7. So this way you can also add a weekday calculation if you want, right? So this is also pretty interesting. Now let us say we want to do some calculations, right? Not create a column but do a calculation, right? So for this case, what we can do, we can go over here back to our report view, okay, and here you have an option to create a measure, okay. So let us say I want to create a new calculation where I show only the total cost, where the name of the company is Prima, right? Prima is the place where I pay the rent. So I have to click on new measure, right? And now I can give it a name, Prima cost, okay. Now observe the formula carefully. So over here we need to create a calculation, so we can create using the calculate formula. So I'll say calculate of what I want to calculate. I want to calculate the cost, okay. This is what I want to do. However, there's a twist. I want to show only the total cost for the company name equal to Prima. So I can use a filter function, right? So I can say filter, right? And what do I want to filter? As you see in the formula, first we have to select the table. So I'll select data sheet 1, right? And within that, what I want to do, I want to show only when company name is equal to Prima, right? Only in that case I want to sum the cost, right? So this is the formula, and let me close it, okay. Now the formula will run. So the calculation I think has been done, right? So let us say I click on any of these graphs, so you see a lot of visualization. Maybe I just want a table, and if I select Prima cost, right, you see I get 3780, right? Why is it 3780? As you see, individual cost for 1 month was 630, so there is 6 months of data, so it shows 3780, right? So this is like a filtered cost calculation that we have done, right? So we can also do this if we use the calculate and filter function. As you see, we go and create a new measure, right? This is not a new column but more like a new measure, right? So keep that in mind, right? This is definitely possible. Now let us say I want to add another table, right? So I can click on table again, okay, and in that table let us say I want to add date and let's say the total cost, okay. So date, as you see, it's already drilled down, but I don't want to see the drill down, so I will remove all this, right? I just want to see the date as it is. Let me bring back the date, and yeah, I'll basically remove all this, right? I wouldn't like to see them. You can go here and just say date, okay, and just bring this up, okay. Now I have the date and the sum of the cost, right? As you see, it's neatly arranged. If I want, I can also go here and say sort by date, okay. And now I think it looks like it's sorted in descending, so I'll change it to sort ascending, okay. So that can work. From 3rd January I have all the possible costs, total cost value at an individual date level. Now let us say we also want to see the values of the cost for the previous day, right, for each row. So if there is, for example, 9th January, parallelly I want to see what was the cost for the previous day, which is 8th January. How can we do this? So for this we can go and add another new measure, more like a calculation again. So I want to see previous day cost, right? So I can do that. So I'll say previous day cost, very simple. So I think the formula was, the spelling was wrong. So now what I can do, I can say do a calculation on what, right? Again, the same cost, right? Not company, but basically cost, right? I selected wrong column, okay. So that is done. But now what is the twist? You have to do it for the previous day, right, for each row. So previous day of the date column, right? So keep that in mind. We are adding this as an additional condition and just close, right? So previous day cost will get now calculated and it should come here, right? So now if I add previous day cost here, let us see what's happening, right? So I'll just make this a little bigger. So if you observe, so for these days, there's no previous day cost, right? Why? Because for example, for 3rd January, there's no data for 2nd January. For 9th January, There's no data for 8 January, so it's blank. Whereas if I come here for 18 January, the total cost was 35, but the previous day cost is showing 9. Why? Because on 17 January, as you see, the total cost was 9, right? So wherever there's a previous day value, that is showing up on the side, right? So if I scroll down a little bit, you see, right? So 3rd February is 630. Previous day was 2nd February, total cost was 13, and that value is showing up here, right? So this is similar to using lag function in SQL. Similar thing can be accomplished here, as you see, right? So this is also very useful to know, right? Now on top of this, finally, let's say for the cost, you want to add some kind of conditional formatting, right? Can you do that? So yeah, you can definitely try and do that. So click there and click on conditional formatting, and let us say you want to change the background color itself, right? So you can click on that. Over here there are multiple options. Let's say we want to write a rule for the cost, right? So you say value is, let's say, greater than, let me put 60, right, and less than 80, right? And this is in terms of number, so I select that. Value is greater than 60, less than 80. Let me select blue color, right? So if the sum of cost for that particular day is between 60 and 80, both greater than or equal to 60, less than 80, then put this blue color. Let's try it out. Okay, so wherever it's between 60 and 80, like 61, 72, 69, and so on, you see it's getting light blue shade. This is very similar to the conditional formatting we can accomplish in Excel, right? So this is also very much possible, right? You can do this. And not only that, the same way, you can also do some visualizations, right? Instead of calling a table, you could also build a simple bar graph or whatever you want, right? So for example, there are a lot of options. So this is clustered column chart, clustered bar chart, so on and so forth, right? This is like a stacked bar chart. So you can play around with the visuals as well. But this is a good start, right? Knowing these basics that we saw today to play around Power BI, right? I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you again in another video. Till then, take care.